Hey guys, welcome back to Total Tactics FPL. It's Fran here and I'm back with the Blank Gameweek 27 cheat sheet preview. The focus this week is to look at fixtures outside of this sort of blank fixture between Arsenal and Liverpool, which will be rescheduled for a double game week in the future, and to look at games such as Tottenham versus Leeds, a Leeds side who have been very poor defensively as of recently, Watford versus Man United, which features a Watford team that, even though they've kind of brought in a more stable defensive manager in Roy Hodgson, still haven't really been able to keep clean sheets consistently and have actually let in a lot of goals. The 4-1 game versus Crystal Palace being a key example. And then two other fixtures within Man City versus Everton, which I imagine will be a key focus for players looking to free hit. I think that 3 City players will be quintessential. And then also this last game of Southampton versus Norwich, which, even though Norwich have shown good form and Dean Smith has actually pulled some great results in terms of wins with Norwich, I still think the Southampton team have built up a steady amount of momentum and have been very consistent with scoring on a game-to-game basis, and I think they've done quite well versus the bottom half of the opposition in recent memory. And with Livramento back in the team, players like Broja and Adams being fit and in form, it's quite a scary sight, and James Ward-Prowse as well might be a key feature too. But let's actually go straight into the defenders. So the defensive changes really, I've moved Ben White down, but I'm not going to discuss too much about it. I just think that right now we have a lot of players who have good value and actually have great fixtures that we can actually consider. Livramento is going to be that key sort of defender for this specific game week, where maybe if, let's say, you wanted to move away from someone like Ben White as an example, or you wanted to look at a defender that has a decent game this week and could potentially get proper hauls in the future, you're once again looking at Livramento, who is now kind of recovered from his injury. And despite the fact that he has rotation, I think he's shown a very strong performance in the previous week, and he can only build on that within the weeks to come. And I think Hasenhüttl's preference for Livramento in the early stages of the season should kind of show up again through this run. But I think Livramento is more of a consideration for people going for a free hit, to be quite honest. There's no real reason to change defenders right now, especially since if you have brought in these Wolves defenders, they've got a game in Game Week 30, and you can also have them for a beautiful run of green games from now until effectively near the end of the season. Livramento is probably just a consideration for a free hit here, or if you've got a gap in your side where maybe if you have, let's say, Trent and Robertson, and you already want an early exit out of Robertson, even though I would probably say that's not advisable, then you can actually do that. A Spurs defender falls here. Over the last few weeks, we've seen this Spurs team just too fallible in defense, and the underlying stats have actually caught up with them. Well, they trended quite well under Conte in the first few weeks. They've definitely fallen off a cliff from there. And the game versus Burnley is a little bit of a weird one because it does come off Ben Mee's great goal. Ultimately, though, I would say what's damning for Spurs is their defenders right now don't seem interesting from the attacking point of view, and therefore are already somewhat more overpriced than some of the other defenses in the league who have posted much more serious and consistent defensive results, such as Wolves and Arsenal. So really, their contention as these sort of cheap budget defenders has really fallen out of favor for me. Dalot is a great option this week as well. He still remains a differential just because United's fixtures do turn for the worse slightly, and he might get benched in games, which is going to be a key problem. So I don't really see how Dalot moves. Burnley defenders once again rise this week. We saw a double clean sheet back-to-back for this Burnley team in a week where we expected at least a team like Arsenal with their fixtures to gain maybe one. And what we saw was Arsenal losing 2 clean sheets and Burnley actually doing extremely well. Burnley once again have another double game week. And the selection here is between several players. You have Roberts, who's a good option, that sort of full-back option who does provide several crosses within a game, and he does actually outrank his peers in terms of expected assists from the defensive position. But probably when you're looking at a Burnley defender, you're kind of actually looking at someone like Nick Pope as someone who you'd sign first and foremost for this game week, especially for a free hit. If not, then I think you're also looking at someone who is a set-piece threat. So Ben Mee would be the great example here. Tarkowski has only scored 1 goal, whereas Ben Mee has done 3 in the last season, in this season alone. And the one thing that I would say in terms of scoring goals and kind of thinking that headers do come at very kind of oddly spaced times, I would say don't be so worried about Ben Mee scoring a goal in the previous week. I think that if you look at Gabriel as an example, I mean, he's very capable of scoring even twice a game or even in any specific game. I think Burnley also have great sort of matchups when it comes to their opponents and their set-piece defenses. So I think Ben Mee is a great option this week if you have the budget for that, mostly if you're looking for a free hit. As I said, I think Pope would be the priority. Perhaps if you actually have a little bit more team value to spare and you'd like to go for a gamble, then it could make sense to push into a Burnley defender as a non-free hit player, but probably not that advisable. Cucurella and Dean are players who have fallen. I just think that Brighton and Aston Villa have posted some really poor results lately. Their defensive stats don't really reflect anything positive either. And whilst Dean is one of the more attacking sort of left backs in the league, and Cucurella similarly, and someone who is a bonus points farmer, as I kind of described in the past, both of them are interesting because they have doubles in the future. But I wouldn't be so interested in getting them simply because I think there are better options for the doubles ahead, and maybe you can only really consider them when the doubles swing back around. So they would sort of be options that you'd maybe look at for that specific double alone, and not week to week at this point in time. I think it's an okay time to think about moving out for these sorts of defenders, or kind of looking at them as temporary options. You could kind of go for a side grade into a Burnley defender this week, then swap back into them. That could be a genuine possibility, just because there isn't much hope really with kind of securing clean sheets on these single game weeks for me from both these sides. Reguilon, unfortunately, had to deal with COVID. He's also generally had fitness issues for the most part of the season, and I imagine missing training from having COVID is going to have an impact on that. He was also on the bench in the second game versus Burnley, so overall not very good signs for Reguilon. And when you see players like Emerson being subbed off extremely early and Reguilon not being considered an option, even though they play on separate flanks, I think it's just a general sort of sign, especially with Sessegnon getting so many minutes, that Reguilon isn't really trusted by Conte. And this kind of pattern I don't think is going to change anytime soon. So unfortunately, Reguilon falls towards the bottom of the cheat sheet, and he really should be considered as one of the sort of first and foremost outgoing transfers within your team, especially considering Spurs' state. The upsetting thing I would say about Reguilon is that he's always looked very good when he's actually been able to play in specific matches, and he's actually provided a lot of key chances himself. But this is the situation we kind of find ourselves in. So let's move on to the midfielders. Elanga's the interesting differential this week. I would say Elanga is potentially the most explosive differential. However, he does come with a huge rotation risk. He is at 4.8, so I think for a free hitter, you should be considering him potentially. He could come off the bench and that could hurt you, but with his recent performances, he should justify a start versus Watford. Perhaps I'm wrong and actually we'll see Rangnick probably play with Rashford instead, as he has in recent memory. But I think there's a strong chance where if you're looking for that sort of differential, and maybe if you are kind of trying to build your team around these three premiums, such as a Fernandes, KDB, and Kane this week, or even Son, to kind of have a quadruple, and filling out the team with more budget options in terms of Burnley players and even Southampton players, then Elanga could be one of those gap fillers in your team, or at least someone to come off first off the bench for you as maybe a replacement to the kind of bog standard Ramsey pick. Odegaard is someone who falls this week. No specific reason. He's an Arsenal player, so I won't discuss too much about it, but I would say overall, in recent memory, this Arsenal team hasn't built too many chances. I think their expected goals also reflect that. And he just simply isn't as direct as a player as his counterpart in Smith Rowe, so he falls. Kulusevski is someone who, by contrast, actually rises. So he was someone that I thought would probably share a little bit more minutes with Lucas Moura, but he has started back-to-back games, and I do think that Conte has quite a bit of faith over Kulusevski and his abilities as a player. I think the one worry with him is his flexibility as a player might mean that he could see out portions of the game as a right wing back, and that was very effective versus a team like Man City, who always play on the front foot and commit a lot of people into the opponent's half. But if he is playing so deep at times, and if he's playing right wing back, then there might not be such great chances for Kulusevski to shine as he did in the Man City game, and that's the slight worry that I have with him here. However, I do really think that at his price, he's a much better option than Lucas Moura. And not only that, there's much more sort of safety with his fitness and his ability to play. So I think as long as Conte keeps his faith with Kulusevski, then I think he can remain a great option for the time ahead, or at least a game like Leeds, where we know this Leeds team will attack forwards, and therefore Kulusevski once again is an interesting option, just like he was in the City game. Dan James is someone who's actually new in the cheat sheet. He didn't show anything in the Liverpool game, but I think just looking at back the recent weeks and kind of assessing Leeds as a team, I think Dan James has really stood out as an option who has provided quite a lot. Harrison was that sort of player with a fantastic game versus West Ham, but if you look over the course of the season, Dan James has actually outscored him on a much more consistent basis. And whilst I wouldn't say that Dan James makes a lot of sense as an option, I think Rafinha really is the only consideration within Leeds. And even then, he's a minutes risk right now. I would say Dan James has been that sort of one sort of shining light in this position where not many options show up, or at least most of these players are rotation options unless they play for Arsenal. Between the 6.1 to 6.7 range, it's a weird one here where I actually drop Bowen, but I do feel that West Ham's sort of run of games will be slightly tougher than Arsenal's, and just on that basis, I would say I would probably equate Bowen with players within the same tier as Rafinha, Maddison, Ward-Prowse, and even Gallagher. Gallagher has still looked exceptional, even though he missed the Chelsea game. There's not. I'll discuss him very shortly, but just in terms of the kind of bracket of Rafinha, Maddison, Ward-Prowse, these are players who actually have doubles in the future, in the very, very near future at least. And I think that's why they're on par at the very least with Bowen. Bowen might be a transfer out just so you can actually bag one of these players when they have doubles. Definitely, I would kind of put Bowen on the same tier as Rafinha, Ward-Prowse, who do have doubles to come. And maybe you could actually look at a sort of switch around with these sorts of players. But I understand a lot of people have their sort of price hedged into Bowen, and he still has, for the most part, been electric for the season and the second half in particular. So that's not to really say that I expect Bowen's form to downtrend a lot, but it's just more, I think we need to give a little bit more importance towards the doubles ahead. As I said, Gallagher rises, just had an exceptional performance, and once again, you can see how much of a talisman he really is for this Crystal Palace team, alongside Zaha, who seemingly has picked up quite a bit of form coming back from AFCON. So that's going to be a little bit of a big positive, where I think Crystal Palace have a lot of sort of top-heavy players where they're very technical, and given the right opponent, they can really conquer, I would say, some of these mid-table and bottom half teams that we would expect them to do well versus. And I think there's strength in depth with Edouard, for example, only playing around 7 minutes within a double game week shows you the sort of strength of the side that they have. Benteke sort of being phased out of the team is another sort of positive element that they've kind of faced. And the fact that someone like Ayew, who was one of their shining lights within a few seasons ago and has dropped off tremendously, is now sort of covered by players like Oli, Zaha, and Gallagher, has shown how much the side has improved. Cornet is someone who unfortunately falls. He was going to be that sort of hidden gem option for Burnley, but it seems like, unfortunately, with the season, and especially such as my own ownership of Cornet, he is unfortunately an injury threat, and unfortunately that has been the big sort of danger sign with Cornet this year. He's just been injured in key games, and when he's actually able to play, he'll do well. But I think that's the sort of issue with ownership. You're not going to be looking at an option who could be a potential minutes risk, and therefore Cornet has to fall. Sorry about the last glitch there. Mine is just a technical error from the previous week. He stays the same as Liverpool, have a blank. Going into the forwards and kind of finalizing things off here, King has sort of succumbed to some injury news, so that's going to be a big hamper for people, I imagine, who've actually kept him on the team and probably kept him for just the regular 2 points expected from not going for a free hit. And with him falling, I think there's a genuine sort of call here to actually go for a -4, maybe kind of stretch your budget towards going for a Broja. I can see a lot of price movement being pushed towards Weghorst and Broja, and I think they're great options as we head into the future doubles. Weghorst, of course, the one that is impending, and then Broja within the weeks ahead. Pukki is someone who, unfortunately, I have to fall. I just think there's not much reason to actually own Pukki at this point in time. He doesn't have any doubles soon, and I think it just makes a lot more sense to actually spread our money within people and forwards, particularly, who are going to have doubles. Otherwise, there's no real utility in holding forwards. Tony arguably does have quite a few good games coming in the future, so I would say he might be the one slight exception for now. Someone like Dennis still has doubles, for example, so he still remains as quite a good option for now. As I said in weeks past, you could even sort of reduce a player in sort of Pukki's position towards someone like Gelhardt or even Ida, just so you can actually spread the money within your team a little bit better and go kind of stay consistent with maybe a 4 defender or 5 midfield setup. Weghorst, as I said, is going to be that big riser this week. I actually thought he looked quite technical in the match where he actually scored his goal and got an assist. So that was quite a big shock for me in that 3-0 Burnley game. And for me, Weghorst has to rise this week with, once again, another double. Not only that, but when you actually see the actual frame of the man himself, you can tell he's a set-piece threat. And you can see it when you were watching sort of highlights of his past performances in the Bundesliga, where he's been a very consistent goal scorer. So Weghorst is almost a dual-pronged threat, especially versus some of these weaker sides, and I think Weghorst might even be the best captaincy option this week, to be quite honest. And that's exactly why I think he has to rise straight away to the top as the best option, just because he might be one of those factors this week who could ruin you this week if you don't decide to kind of stretch your way towards him. Adams is someone who was new in the cheat sheet last week, so no real updates there. Edouard, unfortunately, is someone who actually falls. Edouard is someone who has been really terrible for me in this sort of massive double game week and someone who is quite responsible literally for my poor performances. I mean, I probably should have even taken a hit to get him out of my team. I was expecting for Edouard to be benched for the first game and then probably play versus Watford, but what we saw was actually just a minute's presence from Edouard, and that's a big dampener because now Mateta has gotten more minutes out of him, and we thought previously that he'd only be contending minutes with Benteke, so that's going to be sort of a big loss for, I think, managers who are not going for the free hit. Unfortunately for me, I think he just spells another hit. There's no guarantee that someone who's missed 2 games back to back and only played 7 minutes within those games combined is going to play 90 minutes in the next game. I might be wrong. I might be taking a gamble, but I think it's quite safe to say that he's probably worth the -4, especially into any option who has either a double this week, such as Weghorst, or future doubles, such as Jimenez or Broja. And Watkins falls once again. He actually was expected to miss the game. The unfortunate thing and the interesting thing maybe is that Aston Villa still have decent runs. They do have a double in the future, and I don't think that they necessarily looked any better with Watkins on the bench, and that's going to be perhaps a good sign to keep Watkins in your team. But I think if you're someone who even considered Watkins as an option previously, I would say just to avoid for now, based on the kind of rotation issues. It's clear that Gerrard has his faith in several players, such as Coutinho. But when we're talking about the forwards, I don't think any option from Aston Villa is particularly interesting for now. And that's really it, because I don't think there's much movement in the keepers. Pope was already posted as the best option in the previous week, and he delivered extremely well in Game Week 26. A little bit earlier than anticipated, to be quite honest. And once again, he reigned supreme as the best keeper option this week. So that's it for the cheat sheet, guys. I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and I'll see you guys in the live stream. Unfortunately, I won't have time to make a team selection video, but I will be kind of illustrating and sort of showcasing my team tomorrow. So I'll see you guys all there.